Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete podcast, hosted by yours truly, Rob Martin. Welcome to Unpacking the Athlete, a podcast dedicated to diving deep into what makes athletes who they are. Today's guest puts on a wide variety of mountain bike races in the southeastern United States. I met this guy in snowshoe at the World Cup event, and we had a blast. He has raced BMX, rode with guys like Dave Mira, has done backflips on bikes. He competed in a few X Game trial competitions, and he started Go Nuts Racing about 8 years ago. Our guest today is Super Dave Moore, who likes to golf. Welcome, Dave. Let's get it.
What's going on, Rob?
Hey, I'm glad you could be here.
Man, yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Heck yeah.
What an intro you got there, man. I don't think I've ever had anybody bring me in like that. That was pretty cool.
Hey, man, just telling the truth. I like to start with a crazy first question. And
All right.
Your first question is not any different. If you had to ride with one person and one person only for the rest of your life, who would you choose out of these three and why? Seth of Burn Peak, Bobo, or Steady Spin?
I'd probably take Steady Spin because he talks to me on the daily, every day. We're two brothers, and we know pretty much everything about each other. So it's awesome. He's like a brother from another mother. Not taking anything from the other two guys. They're awesome as well and great to hang out with and ride with as well. But yeah, I'd probably have to take Kevin with me to the end.
All right. What would you do for a living if you didn't put on these cycling events? Did you have a backup plan, or what would you do there?
So what a lot of people don't know is that my background, I've always been in some kind of, corporation of some sort. I was in aviation for 12 and a half years. I used to be part of Pratt Whitney, where we would disassemble and put back together jet engines. So I'm very familiar with military and commercial jet engines. And so I'd probably fall back into that realm of life if I had not the opportunity to work my dream.
Jet engines.
Yeah, I actually fell into that job, years ago. I was in between jobs, started working in their warehouse, and they're such a great company that they would pay for all the employees' education. So I took advantage of that, and I went back to school, finished my bachelor's, and then carried on and ended up getting my master's degree. And then once I got my master's degree, I just kind of floated up the ranks a little bit till I couldn't basically get any higher unless I moved. We thought about moving in different places. I mean, there was jobs in San Francisco, Connecticut, Oklahoma, West Palm Beach, different places around the country. But in the end, we realized that, Georgia's our home. We didn't want to go anywhere. So for me to grow and utilize my education and experience, I needed to kind of spread my wings, so to speak. So I threw my resume out there and went from a global company to a private company. And from that private company, that boss right there, he pushed me to start the business I have now. So it was a great encouragement by leaders of their own.
Hey, man, that's actually pretty cool that someone you were working for was like, hey, you need to go do this because this is your passion.
Yeah, actually, it was funny because I used to, I think I've told you before, so BMX freestyle was my passion, was my what I did all the time. So I did BMX freestyle, and then I injured myself. And then after I injured myself, I was off the bike for a couple of years, and I gained a lot of weight. So I was like, how can I do this? So I played around with mountain biking for years in between my BMX. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get back on a bike. I'm going to start pedaling. So the local trails, there's a trail here in Columbus, Georgia called Flat Rock Park. It's about 11, 12-mile loop. I couldn't even get halfway through the lap. And my goal was to get a full lap in without stopping. So I kept pushing myself on the regular until finally I was doing multiple laps, 2 to 3 laps. And then I felt comfortable enough to start racing just to keep that drive of staying in shape. And once I started racing and going to different promoters and this. I mean, I was having a blast, but the traveling and everything, there's a little bit of wear and tear on the checkbook, if you know what I mean. And so I was
Yeah.
like, man, it'd be cool if there was more local stuff. The thought was there. And one day at work, I always took my bike to work and rolled it into the office and hung it up on the wall. And my boss came in there one day, and he happened, to see it, for the 100th time. And he was like, "Man, you sure do like this mountain bike stuff, don't you?" And I was like, "Man, I love it. I love anything with two wheels, basically. I don't care if it's road, mountain, BMX, you name it. I mean, I love it all." And he basically asked me a question. He goes, "Have you ever considered opening up a bike shop or doing something in the industry or something?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've never thought about opening up a bike shop, but I do have this thought of starting a race series." And then he like stood over my desk and said, "Do you want to stay there behind that desk and sit there and wonder if this is, what ifs and all this, or do you want to step outside the box and give it a go and see what it becomes?" And I was like, "Man, thanks for that push. Thanks for that motivation." So I went home that night and told my wife, I was like, "Look, I'm fired up. I think we should start a race series." I said, "We'll start off small. We'll put on some local events, see how it goes, and go from there." And the rest is history. We put on 3 races here locally, which was no more than 20-minute drive to each trail. People seem to love it. And so we figured, why not? The next year, we went ahead and did a 7-race series in the same area, just branched out a little bit further, and we just grew from there. And now we're all over the Southeast and up and down the East Coast in some places. So it's wild.
I've kind of watched you add new events and grow. It's been cool to kind of see how you've just, I don't know. I at first I just thought you were in the Georgia area, and then I started noticing you're like all the way in Alabama, and you're over. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the way we started growing is we just get people from other states coming to our races, and then the suggestions were, "Hey, we've got these trails here. You should come visit. You should check this out." And next to know it, we just started spanning. Our second year in business, we became USAC sanctioned, USA Cycling sanctioned, and from there, when people realized that there was another avenue for riders to get their national rank points, we were just that extra race series that people could come and get those points. And so people started realizing, hey, they're USAC. Why don't you have a race here? Blah, 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 blah. And so I couldn't ever say no. I love the fact that we got to go to all these new places and ride. So we made it work. And so now it's gotten to the point to where we have so many races, so many parks and trails to pick from that some people just have to sit the bench one year and then we have to circle back and try to mix it up a little bit. But
Yeah,
we do
yeah.
love what we do.
It's obvious that you love it because you do a good job promoting it. I do have a question that might be a little off the wall. When you're USAC, do you have to pay per head to them for people
We
racing?
we do. The way it works is USA Cycling, what they do is they like for everyone to have an annual license, and that allows you to become nationally ranked. If you're not an annual license holder, then you have to pay a $15 racing license for that day. So normally when someone comes to a race and they sign up, it'll ask you that question: are you a USAC license holder or not? Regardless, but yes, we have to pay USAC an X amount of for permit fees, rider fees, all that. And it's mainly just insurance coverage. It gets very pricey.
I bet. So I just kind of wondered if there was a lot of money going there, and if so, it's just good that you're still, you're able to keep your head above the water and keep the races going.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a thing that a lot of riders don't understand. Even myself, when I race, I didn't understand why it costs X amount of dollars to race. I was like, man, these people must be making a killing. So when people see, from the outside looking in, they're like, oh, they got 300 riders at an event, and each rider paid whatever $50 a piece. Their promoters are banking. Nope, that's not the case. That's
Right,
not the
right.
case at all. I mean, you break down each individual, you're talking $15 per person, and then all the, we have staff we pay. No, everyone that works with us are all on a, we pay our staff. There's no volunteers. I mean, we do ask for volunteers from SORBA groups, which are IMBA, those areas that take care and maintain those trails. Whenever they come out and support us and get the trails ready for us and want to step in and help, then we always give back to those organizations. Of course, yes, we have to pay ourselves. I do tell people it's not an easy job whatsoever. If anyone tries to start a race series to try to make money, it's not the way to go. Because if it was this easy, everybody would be doing it. Not everybody races. I mean, some people want to give it a shot one year and then they don't race the next year. They have all these goals. So you have a lot of goals out there for a lot of racers, but then you have those lifers who want to race every year. Like you said, we've been doing this for 8 years, and the racers that we have, I could probably count on one hand how many I still see from 8 years ago. But it's like about every second year, you start to see a new wave of new riders, which is awesome. I mean, and then eventually you'll start seeing some of those older riders coming back around the circuit again. They're like, hey, I got out of shape. I'm going to get back into it. But we try to make it fun for everyone, whether it's your first race, last race, or, whatever. Beginners to pros.
Why don't we shift gears a little bit, and can you talk about how you got started in BMX as a kid, and maybe talk about your first few races, or did you not race, or was it just freestyle?
I did not race BMX. I gave it a shot a couple of times just because I had some buddies who did it, but it wasn't my thing. I was more intrigued by the BMX freestyle stuff. So I'm an old schooler, one of the OGs back from the 80s. People don't know this, but I turned 50 this year. That's right, the big 50, but I still have a mind of a 22-year-old. And my body reminds me every time I fall that this is, you're taking a toll on yourself. But no, I used to be a skateboarder when I was young. I was big into skating in the early 80s. And this is going to take back a lot of these older guys out there who are listening, that back in the early 80s, I was a big hair metal fan. I liked all your hair band music back in the day, Metallica and, Motley Crue and all those guys. So one day I would use my BMX bike to latch my skateboard onto the handlebars and ride through some trails to get over to some buddy's house. And they had a little launch ramp at the end of their driveway. And we just always skate and hit that launch ramp. And it just happened to be, it was weird. This one particular day, I was the only one that had a bike, and we were sitting there in the grass, and we were like, how far you think you could jump your bike? And so we started just jumping the bike to see how far we could go. And my mom, she pulls up and she's like, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. That was key to let me know that if I wanted to get my weekly magazine, I needed to go or whatever. So I had to go. So I left my bike with my buddies, grabbed my board because that was the most important thing, was my skateboard. Jumped in the car with her, went to the grocery store. And the first, while she's shopping, I darted right over to the magazine rack. So I'm looking for the latest skateboard magazine or whatever, and I'm looking for the latest Parade magazine. A lot of the old schoolers will know what Parade magazine is. I come across a BMX magazine, BMX Freestyling. It had Eddie Fiola doing a huge 1-footer out of the old pipeline out of California. And right then, I just locked in on that magazine. I didn't even open the magazine up. I just ran to my mom and said, I've got to have this magazine. And then right then, I just followed her like a puppy through the store, reading that magazine, and just could not believe what they were doing on these bikes. The next day, I went to get my bike from my buddy's house, and I showed him what was up. He drags his bike out. The next thing you know, we're not even skateboarding anymore. We're trying to figure out how they're doing these tricks because all we can go by is by the pictures. We don't know what how they're doing these flatland tricks and stuff. So we eventually started figuring it out, ordering some of the old VHS tapes, and just started, went from there. And I was 11 years old that summer, about to be 12, without fail. I mean, I was obsessed with the sport. I wanted to ride. I wanted to be pro so bad. I drove every bike shop crazy, wanting to get sponsored of some sort, and we started like a whole little group of riders, man. We called ourselves the Ground Patrol. We did little shows for little events that came to town. We were like at the fairs. And I remember one time we did a show for Dirt Track We went out and did during intermission. We went out and did a flatland show for those guys. It was wild. Well, those are the good old days. Did that for years, all the way up into the early 90s when the sport kind of took a drop. No one rode anymore. You couldn't find magazines. You couldn't find bike parts. Everything was so underground. So around 18, 19 years old, I hung my bike up for numerous reasons. One, I just didn't have anybody to ride with anymore. People were tearing their ramps down. You just didn't hear about it. Like I said, you couldn't find magazines, parts. You go to the bike shops, and they actually had to go in the back and dig up, if they even had anything left of BMX. And then the X Games came out. So at this point, I done hung my bike up. I was about 18, 19 years old. I had moved to Columbus, Georgia. I met my wife. We were married at a really young age. I was about to be 21. I was 20 a month before my birthday when we got married. She was 21 and I was about to be 21. Got married. The next year, we went ahead and built us a house. And when we built our house, I was like, I'm building a half pipe. Well, I'll take that back. Rewind. When she was pregnant with our first son, the 95 X Games came on. I was like, what in the world is going on here? When have these guys been riding? Where have they been? My jaw dropped. I knew right then I wanted to ride again. And here I am, married with a kid. The rest, man, we built this big ramp in the backyard. There was a skate park over in Warner Robins, Georgia called Ramp and Roll. I used to go over there. They had bike days, Wednesdays and Sundays. That was the only time you could ride a bike. The rest was skateboarders. So we'd go over there and we'd ride. I started meeting guys around my age and a lot of younger riders coming up, kind of like that what they call the mid-schoolers now. Started riding with all those guys. Started focusing more on vert again, and I rode a lot of vert in park. And then my wife, she got transferred to a job up in Pennsylvania, which was a sweet and sour situation because it was a culture shock for us because we were not familiar with snow. We're not familiar with the city life like they are up there. So we lived on the outskirts of Philadelphia. I found out about this skate park called Shimerville, which was actually pretty famous in the 90s. I went up there, met a rider. Actually, his name's Brian Cunningham. He owns a BMX stunt show now to this day and travels the world called Dial BMX. Love the guy. Every cent that guy's made has been from riding bikes, which was awesome. But he was like 18. I was like 28. He became like my best friend. We hung out. We rode. We pushed each other. We'd be the only ones in the skate park. And then we started going to Woodward Camp a lot. And so I will remind you, in between all this, I've got 3 kids at the time. I would squeeze in any little bit of free time I had to go ride. And my wife, she was in the restaurant industry, so she was always at work. And there was times I took all 3 of my kids, had them sit up on the decks of the ramps and watch me ride, And so my kids could tell you stories of their entire life of sitting on the decks of ramps, right? And I've tried to get them to get into it. My boys got into skateboarding a little bit. My daughter was the first one to ever try to drop in on a ramp. She OTB'd, but I give her full respect for trying. But that carried on. I mean, for years, that was my love. We moved back down to Georgia after living there for about a year and a half. So we got back down to Georgia. I was really focused. There was a lot of things going on in my life at that time, as far as career-wise, raising kids. I had a full plate on me. I mean, because, my kids come first. I wanted to make sure that they were getting through school, doing their sports, So I coached baseball. I coached football. I was, on the helped with the softball teams, cheerleading, you name it. I mean, my kids were in everything from acting, dancing, sports. My son was in a band. My youngest son's an artist. It's just crazy. And the best thing I knew to do was to have a half pipe at all times in the backyard so I could always ride when I had free time. So I didn't have the luxury of a lot of riders who got to go and tour a lot and do shows and contests and things like that. So I just basically would learn tricks, go to a contest, and really just hang out with my buddies. I made a lot of great friends and connections. Like I mentioned before, I've ridden with some of the top pros in the world, Jamie Bestwick, Matt Hoffman, Dave Mirror, put some big names out there. Kevin Robinson taught me how to do a backflip. I was at Woodward Camp. I wasn't going to leave until I figured out this backflip thing. He was off in the corner riding a bowl. He comes over there and he goes, "I see what your problem is." He gave me one little tip. And the first time that I rotated a backflip, I did a flip and a half. I did a full flip and then landed on my head. And then he was like, "You got it. You just got to control it now." And then by the end of the night, I already had it on wood. I went from foam pit to resi mat to wood in less than like an hour, thanks to Kevin Robinson, who unfortunately passed away, a few years ago. But yeah,
what was the tip?
What was the tip? Placing your butt behind the seat. A lot of people want to go after it like they're trying to do a gainer off a diving board. But what you want to do is it's really one of the easiest tricks to do. I mean, you just got to commit. Once you're leaving the lip of the ramp, just follow your head, and keep your butt behind the seat, push up, and as you're riding out the transition, it'll follow behind you. And then once you see your landing when you're upside down, it's just like landing if you were to do a straight dead sailor. Just pull up on those handlebars and have a clean landing. The most important thing is don't over rotate and don't go too quick. The further back you put your butt, the faster you're going to spin. So that was my mistake the first time he taught me, when he said, "Put your butt behind the seat." I kept my butt behind the seat the entire time, and it just kept on making me flip faster. So it was a matter of just controlling where your butt is when you're in the air. So, but yeah, and follow your head. That's the key to BMX, is wherever your head goes, whether it's a 360 or whatever, your bike's going to go that way.
Okay.
But yeah, learned a lot of stuff doing that throughout the years, man. And like I said, when I was about 34, I was riding vert up at a skate park in Noonan, Georgia, called the Factory. A lot of folks who skate and ride bikes that are from this area would definitely know what I'm talking about. They had this huge 13-foot vert ramp. We would session that thing. Sundays were like our vert days. We would just spend hours out there riding. One day, man, I was clowning around, and this goes to say, don't clown around when you're on a bike, especially riding vert. A buddy of mine was standing up on the ramp. I figured I'd drop in and try to spook him. Well, not only did I spook him, but the way he turned, he spooked me a little bit. So when I pulled back into the transition to try to point back down, I realized I was I had pulled myself too far away from the lip. So when I try to go back down the ramp, my back tire only was rolling. So I kind of like just did a loop out, just basically manual down the transition so fast that when I hit, my butt hit the flat bottom, and I hit so hard I bounced like a ball back up on my feet. But I knew something was wrong because I compressed my spine. I was off my bike for about 8 weeks. I went and had an MRI. They said I had two bulging discs, and they said I could use surgery, but I could let it heal on its own. But he said that any compression could flare it back up again and cause serious damage. So, of course, I'm a rider. What am I going to do? I'm not going to listen to a doctor, right? So once I healed up and everything felt great, I got back on my bike and I went out and rode my ramp. And I had a 24-foot wide, 6-foot high spine ramp with an 8-foot extension with a sub box. So I went out there and basically did a tail tap, just flew out, did a little tail tap on the deck to hop back in. And when I did, it compressed my spine and I was out for 6 more weeks. That's when my wife was like, "Look, it's getting to a point to where you can't even ride a bike without getting hurt." So I was like, "No, I'm just going through an injury phase. I got to get through this." So once that healed up after 6 weeks, I said, "You know what? No more compressed tricks anymore." So I stayed away from the tail taps and anything that had any kind of jar to it. So I went on to ride for another year and a half without any issues. My last contest was at the Factory. I think that was around 2008, 2009-ish. I went and did the contest. Everything was great. I think I came in 4th place that weekend. Then we were just all goofing off after the contest, out there riding. And I went and threw a backflip out of one of the mini ramps, which I've been throwing backflips all that day amongst other tricks. And I just came up short a little bit. And when I rotated, my back tire hit the lip and it jarred me forward. And when it did, it jacked my back up again and shattered my wheel. And there was a guy named Steve Nowak. A lot of people down here in the South, and especially in the BMX world, knows who Steve is. He comes over there and he's like, man, you really shattered your wheel. And I was like, yeah. And so him and I got to talking, and I went ahead and ordered like a whole new bike from him. So I ordered a bike, new wheel, everything basically. Well, I say bike, I meant frame. Got a frame, new wheel, and everything. When it was all shipped to me, it just basically stayed in the box till one day I got bored and finally built up a bike. And then after I built it up, it just stayed in the garage. And that's when I realized, I guess I'm not going to be doing much riding anymore. And I was trying to make my wife happy at the time too, because she didn't want to see me injured anymore. So I just, I fell back on my second favorite sport, which was golf. I come from a golf family. Ever since I was able to hold a club, I've always had a golf club. So I started taking a little bit more serious. My wife would start saying that, when are you going to start doing grown-up sports? And I'm like, grown-up sports? It takes years to perfect these tricks. What are you talking about? But to make her happy, and now, and I wasn't hating it. Golf is awesome. I know a lot of people think it's boring, but it's that individual sport that I like. That's why I like the BMX. I mean, if it's anybody's fault, it's your fault. And not saying that you're at fault for anything. It's just, it's a learning curve to try to perfect something. And that's what I liked about BMX, is trying to perfect something. And that's the same thing with a golf club. I mean, you're the only person swinging the club. It ain't nobody else. So either learn the fundamentals and the techniques of how to hit the ball, and I've always been pretty well-rounded an athlete of any kind, baseball, football, biking, you name it. But I could not figure out why I couldn't hit this damn white ball. So eventually, yeah, I mean, I started playing golf, and the company I worked for, they were looking for someone to put on events. And I stepped up to the plate, and I started putting on golf tournaments. And that's kind of like where I kind of got the experience of putting on events as a whole. So I used that same technique of putting those golf events together as I did whenever I got into mountain biking, which I mentioned earlier. I got back into mountain biking because golf, I started gaining weight. I'm not a walker at golf. I like to ride that golf cart. I like to sip on the adult beverages on each hole when it's a hot summer day, so it all adds up in the end. I knew I needed to make a change in my life. I still, to this day, I still play golf. I still ride my bike. I ride bikes a lot more than I play golf. It's just because now it's my job, and I love it.
Absolutely. So speaking of golf, if you could pick, or if you could recommend, or maybe what's your favorite golf course anywhere in the U.S. that you would tell someone to go and play?
That's huge. I love Sawgrass down in Jacksonville, Florida. That's an awesome course. That's definitely where the PGA Tour goes through. I've never been to the Masters. That's a dream come true, to go to Augusta and play at the Masters. I mean, there's a lot of a lot of these courses are private and it's hard to get into. Another great course would be like the Phoenix Open over in Phoenix, Arizona. That's a great course. I don't know. I mean, there's so many, because every time I go to a new golf course, I'm like, this is the best course ever. Just like when you're riding a mountain bike, when you go to a new mountain bike trail, you're like, this is the best trail ever. So many.
Yes. Yes.
Everything has their best. But if I were to pick a golf course to play all the time, it would probably be Sawgrass. That's probably my favorite.
Okay. I'm 100% on what you're saying. We just went to Bentonville like the week before last or whatever, and again, like you said, every trail, oh, this is the best trail ever, and then you get on this is the best trail ever. I totally get what you're saying, man.
Oh yeah. I know. I mean, it's like that, and that's how we try to pick a lot of our races, is like we try to add spice to our race, especially our XC races. We try not to be the same old. We try to each year when we come back around to, either if it's the same trail, we'll try to do another route or go opposite or something, just to kind of like keep it different than where people are used to, like especially locals. They'll come in there and they'll like, this is the way we should go. I was like, no, I get it. you're local, and I take a lot of advice from the locals, but I also try to rip the rug out from under their feet a little bit by saying, we're going to do this, and they're like, oh, we never do it this way. I'm like, exactly. So, and now that we're doing enduro races, it's tough to find a lot of parks that have a lot of enduro lines, and so we've pretty much, I keep close tabs on trail builders and new parks and things like that. And they keep me in the loop of what's to come and what to look out for and things like that. So we're always looking for new stuff. If you
Absolutely.
know anything, let us know. Because we're game. The one thing that I love about what we do is the fact that we get to travel and get to ride this stuff and then to share it with other people by saying, hey, we're going to have a race here that they've never heard of. So that's the
That's
most exciting part to me.
that's awesome. You raced mountain bikes. What discipline was that? Was that XC? Was that enduro? Was it downhill? What were you doing when you were coming off the golf because you're like, I gotta shed some weight?
Yeah, so to shed the weight, so this is funny again. Here we go. So to shed the weight, my problem was is whenever I used to go and ride mountain bikes, is that I always wanted to do tricks in the woods because that was my BMX side trying to talk to me. But when I realized how expensive mountain bike parts were, I was like, okay, I need to keep my wheels on the ground. A friend of mine hooked me on Strava. And so whenever I got addicted to Strava, it was like a video game to me. It was like I was trying to rank up like you would playing a video game and trying to get to the top of the leaderboard. So once I started doing that and started seeing that I was up around the top 5 of my area, or even all time on some of the lines or whatever, I was like, I want to start racing XC. I started racing XC, and it wasn't until later when I already knew about downhill racing and things like that. But, where I live, there's not a whole lot of downhill stuff unless you go further up north, and especially enduro. So I had to kind of like measure out where I live, what I'm going to be doing the most of. And at the time, I just didn't have that kind of extra cash to float over to a $5,000+ bike, for a downhill or enduro. So I had to stick around that XC world. That's what kept the weight off. That's what I focused on. It wasn't until I met Kevin Steady Spin. He was more into the aggressive riding, gravity stuff. I loved it. Every time, I was on an XC bike and went downhill, I could handle it. I had the handling skills and whatnot. Again, thankful for BMX for giving me all that. But then I just knew that this was a new love. Kevin and I would go on these trips and just ride downhill all the time to the point to where this was a new life for me. So I just started my focus was on gravity stuff. Everything was gravity. We're going to bike parks. We're going here. We're going there. And at this time, we were only putting on XC races. And then there was an unfortunate mishap that happened with Third Coast Productions that was ran by Brent Norset. He had made a statement on Facebook or all social media that he would no longer be putting on enduros right when I was thinking about racing some enduros. Well, as soon as he made that statement, I had 3 different people from 3 different circles reach out to me and ask me, was I going to start doing enduro races? Where they got that rumor, where they got that idea, I have no idea. I told them straight up that I honestly didn't know much about how the races were ran, that it would definitely be something that I would look into since the interest is there. I reached out to Brent, gave him my condolences about his wife and everything, because his wife, the reason why he wasn't able to do his races is because his wife is like my wife. She's like she's the wizard behind the curtains. She does everything behind the scenes. When Brent and I, we are the promoters. We're the people that's in, we're basically the poster boys. So I went to him and was asking him, would he be interested in selling his time and equipment? And he was not interested in selling his time and equipment. But we started hitting it off over the phone, and I was like, well, hey man, what if you time the events and then I promote the events? So he thought about it, and he's like, you know what, that sounds pretty cool. And so we did our first race together to see if we could just, get along and see how we work together and see, and for me to see how the operation works as well. So we did a race called East Coast Productions Goes Nuts. We threw that together, had a decent turnout, got the word out, and it was something that I realized that I wanted to do. And so we made agreement that I would start a Go Nuts series, enduro series, and then he would just be doing the timing. He did our timing for us for about a year or so, and then he ended up going and doing his own thing, and then I ended up buying my own timing system, and now we do all of our timing for all of our events. So I do all of our enduro timing, all of our XC timing. It was definitely a great purchase, knowing that we're going to do this for a long time. So that's how we got into enduro, and I learned from Brent basically how he set up stuff and everything. And of course, I tweaked it the Go Nuts way and did it my way, because I'm all about production. I want everything to look good. I want someone, when they come to a race, they're like, yo, I know I'm at a race when I go to a Go Nuts race. And I want people to know that their money was very well spent when they come and they see how much we put into our races and everything we do, because everything we do is rider suggested from beginning to the end, and everything in between. It's all been suggested by riders, because I'm a rider. Obviously the racers are riders, so we want to get a full, grasp on everything. And that's the whole thing. I mean, everything from what music is being played in the background to what kind of awards they want to the prizes to how the course is taped and all that. I mean,
top notch.
Yeah, we try. We try.
Yeah, that's what you want, right? Man, I've always had the thought that I wanted to try an enduro race one of these days, because it just sounds kind of fun. So maybe I'll
It
have
really
to.
is. And what we do for our enduros is we spoil a lot of our riders too. A lot of riders, they come in thinking enduro is all downhill, and they miss the concept of what enduro truly is. Enduro, in my opinion, and people may argue with me about this, but I think enduro is the hardest, most physical discipline on a mountain bike of any other mountain bike. I know the training and everything that goes into XC riding. I know everything that goes into road riding. I know what it takes to be a downhill rider. But you take all of that, you need the endurance, you need the fueling, you need the bike handling, you need to know how to go down, flow, chunk, tech, double blacks. You got to know how to ride a bike. I mean, it's not a beginner sport. And you're going to be up on a mountain going anywhere between, depending on where you're at, it could be 10 to 30 miles of riding all day. And a lot of that riding is going to be straight up hills. You're going to be pushing bikes. Some of these places that you're going to ride, you may not be able to ride a bike, period. You're going to have to dismount and push your bike up to your stage. And once you get to that stage, there comes the more the technical spot. I mean, some of this stuff may be true rake and ride style. It could be, a nice flow trail. I mean, it could be chump. You never know what you're going to get. So that's what I love about enduro, is because you truly don't know what you're going to get, and you have to have that physical fitness to finish it. And the goal is to finish. Yeah. Once we say go, it's usually we have from 9 a.m. till 3 o'clock for you to have your chip turned in. And it's really a chill sport, because it's one of those sports that you can hang with your buddies. You meet new friends. You're at these awesome parks that provide these awesome trails or whatever. And, and everybody's together and they're rooting each other on. And once you get to that, it's satisfaction just to get to a certain stage. Someone might say, man, I dread having to climb to get to stage 3. But once you get up there, it ain't like you got to drop in right then. You get to rest. You get to get your breath back. If you got snacks and drinks on you, you'll fill up. You'll sit there. And next you know it, it's when it's your time to drop in. Take your time, go, and try to go down as fast as you can without getting hurt, obviously, and have the smoothest run. Yeah. And then you got people at the bottom of the mountain rooting for you. That same group that you made friends with or you're hanging with, they're all there, and they're, and it just makes the environment, like, to a point to you forget you're in a race. You forget you're in a race, and it feels like you're on just a big group ride with like 200 other riders plus, and everybody's just having a great time.
Sounds fun, man.
Yeah, it is, dude. I mean, I recommend it. When I'm not racing I don't race my races, but I do race other promoters' races. I get along with a lot of the promoters. We work with each other, and that's something else that it's great about this sport is that it's not a cutthroat industry. I mean, to some it may be, and shame on them for thinking that way, but we're just all here to try to put people on bikes and have a good time doing it. Majority of the promoters that are up and down the East Coast, I mean, I'm good friends with. Like if we have timing issues, I can reach out to another promoter and ask them if we can borrow a timing mat or extra chips or whatever the case may be. And I'm the same way. If a promoter needs help from me, I'm there for them if I'm available.
Yeah, enduro, man. I think I gotta try. I gotta try one because, like you said, it's different than downhill. Downhill's like you're less than usually 6 minutes and your run's done, right? And you don't really have uphill. I mean, sometimes you can see they've got sections, they've got a pedal, maybe like a flat section or a slight incline. And then you've got the XC world where, I mean, it's basically all out for 90-ish minutes, give or take. I mean, it might be an hour and 20, but then you've got the enduro, and it's almost like it's a whole day race, right? I mean,
It is.
you got to get to stage one, then you got to rip it, and then you got to get yourself on your bike to the next stage, and then you got to rip it, and like you said, you got this time window. So if you have, let's say you're done with stage two, but something's wrong with your bike, well, now you got to fix your bike and still get to the next stage before the time's cut off. So yeah.
Yeah, and we try to make it fun. It's not cheap to put these races on, and it's definitely not cheap for the riders to sign up for. And that comes the respect and understanding of what goes into these races. Like you said, it's more mental than it is physical too. We try to do our best to make it fair, like a true enduro, like the Enduro World Series. They're not going to have a
Yeah.
lift access. They're not going to have a shuttle. They're not going to have feed stations for you or anything like that. With us, we want it to be fun for you all day. So we know that you're going to have to probably, we have anywhere between 4 to 6 different stages. And if we're able to at least squeeze in one shuttle run for you, whether it's at the end of the race or right in the middle of the race, we try to provide that for you. And we normally, what we call a squirrel's nest, we put a like a feed zone area for you, so you can come and restock on your food and drinks and things like that. So we do spoil our riders, and I think that's what makes us unique a little bit. Is that, I mean, as a rider, I know what it takes. I know, someone's going to lose a water bottle, or someone's going to didn't prepare right or something, and it's not just for that. It's just our appreciation for you coming out as well. That's why we also, we don't charge anything. If you've ever been to one of our races, we don't charge for donuts and bananas and things that we offer for the morning time. We've got plenty of waters for everybody. And then during the race, we'll cook hot dogs for everybody, just to say, hey, thank you for coming out. Have yourself a hot dog, fuel up. Could I sell those hot dogs for like $4 a pop? Yeah, but I don't. But
making me want to come down and do your race series.
The thing is, I mean, like I said, I mean, those little things like that don't cost a whole lot to give back, and it's very greatly appreciated by the riders. For our races, we want people to, it is competitive. We have the goofy little squirrel and everything like that, but again, we have the goofy names everybody likes and stuff, but at the end of the day, we are a competitive series. We want people to know that when they come to our races, not only are you there to compete, but you're there to have a good time. And we want you to leave with memories. And while you're there, I mean, I'm not going to squeeze anybody out of all their money and well-earned money. It's like, hey, you're here, you're at an event, you've paid to get in. You're in our house now. Let me treat you, so, and that's what we're all about. And when you show up, our production is like, I mean, I think I'm always saying we could do better, but I always put the money right back into the races. I mean, I want it to be bigger than what it is. Yeah. We're going to put on the same show if I have 2,000 riders or if I have just 2 riders. So that's what I always say. It doesn't matter. Bobo made a joke one time on his video. If you go back, he did one of his first XC races, and I wanted to put a knot in his head for for getting lost, but it was funny because we've been known to have some of the best well taped courses for anybody. No one could get lost. Someone busted through some tape, and the tape was laying on the ground, and he kept on going straight where the tape was at. And of course, he films it, and it's on his YouTube.
I
He
do
comes
remember
back,
that video, and I thought
and
it
I
was
was like,
hilarious.
man, of anything that I prefer you not put in, you put in. But anyway,
Right, right.
I'm down there. It's early in the morning. My thing is whenever I get a microphone on my hand, it's like a pacifier. I just feel safe with it. I'm down there talking, and he's over there trying to do his little bit, and he's like, "There's no one here." Dave's down there talking on a microphone like he's talking in front of like 1,000 people, and Kevin's like, "That's Dave. That's what he does." So, but I
Oh
never know. You
man.
could be in the parking lot for all I know. But anyway, but no, yeah,
What
Rob, you need to come down, man. Get in a race.
I do, I do. I know my buddy Alex came down and did your one of your I think he's maybe done two, but he did the one at Coldwater Mountain, and I think he won that one.
Yeah.
What discipline sees your biggest turnout out of like the enduro and the XC? Where do you see more racers?
Right now, I mean, I will say enduro is the most turnout. We have a 300 rider cutoff, and depending where we're at, we will sell out. We were at Jared's place down here. I don't know if you've heard of Jared's. They've been in business now just over a year, and we were the first promoter to put on a race there. And what was great about putting the race there is that we put it on before their grand opening. So the only people who are allowed to ride there were those who were registered for the race. So it was huge. I mean, so many people came out of, I mean, just everywhere just so they could get a first glimpse of what this park was like. I will tell you that their park is so gnarly and it's so much fun that we sold out at 300 riders, and 47 people backed out and sold their entries because they didn't think they could do it. Yeah, I mean a couple stages. I mean it's definitely I mean like I said, enduro as a whole, and I'm not pointing out a park. I'm talking about it doesn't matter what park. Enduro as a whole is not a beginner sport. Even though there's amateur and expert, we'll get people saying, "I can't believe you put this run in for an amateur." Well, amateur are those that know how to ride a bike. It's just that they might not be able to pedal up 6 stages when an expert can. The
Yeah.
expert, it means how much more fit are you than the other person. So these expert riders, yeah, they may be more fit to get up 6 stages and be able to ride any terrain that's given to them. All of our stages are, yeah, you may have a road gap, you may have a drop, but at the same time, we have a beeline to where you don't have to take that road gap. You don't have to take that big drop. You don't have to go over that big rock or whatever it is, but you'd be penalized to go around it, even though you know it's faster to go off a drop. But we always
Yep.
have an A and B line in those categories. So on those stages. So we do make it fair for everyone. But if you're an amateur who can send it, I mean, we sometimes call out some of those riders. We'll be like, "Hey, man, saw you hit 2 road gaps in a 6 foot drop. About time for you to move up to expert, don't you?" But then their excuse is like, "Yeah, but I just can't pedal up 6 stages." I get it. I mean, it's a tough sport. It's a tough sport. But yeah, and that's really the only confusion we have with people like trying to transition over from XC to enduro, because they look at enduro, as endurance, and that's another discipline that we're going to be starting. Is we're going to be doing some endurance races coming up in 2024. And we're actually doing a couple this year. We've got one coming up in June at Chihuahua Park, where we're going to do, it's a 20-mile loop on single track, and we're going to do a 20, 40, 60, and 80-mile race. So anybody that wants to drop in one of those categories and think they got those miles in them, sign up. So you have those XC riders that like that long distance riding, but they don't like necessarily a lot of gnar that the enduro and downhillers like. So when they look at enduro, they think, "Oh, that's endurance." When they get there, they're like, Nope. The endurance part is climbing the mountain, but then you got to have that riding skill to come back down. And that's the part you're timed on. It's a learning curve for some, but just to explain to a lot of people out there, especially your listeners, I tell people straight up, when they call me, they're like, hey, I'm thinking about entering this enduro race to be my first one. And I'll question them. As much as I want you to sign up, I'm more concerned about your safety than anything and how you ride a bike. So I'll let them know right now, this trail is not for beginners. If you're capable of going down a double or a single black diamond trail, whether you walk it or ride it, that's on you. But I'm going to let you know that a couple of your stages will be double black diamonds. And so, I mean, I say it like it is, man. There's no sugarcoating it. I could say, no, man, it's good. You're good, man. Just come out, sign up. We also got into downhill racing this year. So our downhill season starts in June. That'll be our opener. I believe we have like 6 scheduled downhill races for the year. So that's going to be exciting. Last year we gave it a try. We were being requested to have some downhill races. And I'm a huge supporter of Downhill Southeast. Nico and I are really good friends. Logan and I, his brother, we always communicate on scheduling and everything. I'll go and race some of their races sometimes. I've got nothing but respect for those guys. And Nico's been putting on downhill races for a while, I think for 8 years as well. I did reach out to him and told him I was thinking about doing some downhill races. And he said, man, that's awesome. He said, the more the merrier, because the reason why he even started is because there was not many people on the East Coast putting on downhill races for people to get their USAC points, to get the UCI Worlds and all that stuff. So props to those guys. And then when we were asked to start doing some races, like I said, I'm all about, respecting the other promoters and not stepping on their toes and trying things different. We tried it out last year and we held 3 downhill races and they were successful. So we figured, why not? Let's do a series this year. I linked up with Nico. We discussed our schedules. He's got his series going on right now. I think they just had their second race at Rock Creek this past weekend. Man, I wish I could have been there, but I had, one of my XC races going on this weekend. Our opener will be in June at Windrock. And so that'll be also our XC finale. So we're going to have a trifecta. It'll be our first trifecta weekend that we've ever put on, where we have XC, downhill, and enduro all in one weekend. So that's going to be
and that's when?
And that's going to be, I believe it's June. It's in June. I should have my schedule in front of me.
That one there, that one's in June.
That right there is in June. But yeah, I got a great relationship with all those guys at Windrock. Actually went up there for the Tennessee Nationals and we timed their XC for their UCI event they just had last month. I don't know if you knew about that. They actually did a 2-week thing there where it was, I think they had enduro, a 2-day enduro the weekend before. And then the weekend we were there, they had the XC and downhill. So that was pretty wild. That's one thing I love about putting these races on, is just all these connections you get. So yeah, June 3rd and 4th, that's the weekend we'll be at Windrock, which is such a gnarly park. That one, again, for all you listeners, is not for beginners. Even the XC course is really technical. I wouldn't say technical. It's just it's a 2.5 mile XC course that will take about 40 minutes for an average rider to complete.
2.5 miles?
2.5 miles, yep. And it'd take anywhere between 30 to 40 minutes on an average rider. Now, a Cat 1 Pro rider could probably do a lap in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. The climb is, I know a lot of XC riders love those climbs, but man, it's a tough climb. But the descent is awesome.
The descent is awesome.
Always awesome. You got to get to the top to come back down.
You're talking about XC again. Do you remember your first ever XC mountain bike race?
Yeah, and it sucked. The one I raced or the one I put on?
The one you raced yourself. Talk about it.
Oh man,
send a picture.
Yeah. Oh man, I got pictures. I need to send you some. So I was a goober. So I used to make fun of mountain bikers. My first race was back in, I think it was 2006. 2005 or something like that. I showed up because I used to make fun of the guys all in their tights. And so I showed up, man. I had a BMX t-shirt with a BMX helmet on. I want to say I had some cargo shorts on or something. And I had Etnies tennis shoes. So I stood out like a sore thumb on the start line. Everybody else is all, aerodynamic with their all tight, got their lacquer on and everything. And I get up there, and of course, the announcer goes, "Oh, look at this guy. It's like he's going to the skate park or something." I'm like, "Dang right." And I'd been riding and everything, but I wasn't in shape. This is way before the time I told you that I lost weight. This is the time I was actually BMXing, and I was goofing off with a buddy of mine, and I said, "I'll go race. How hard could it be?" Yeah, that was an eye opener. But I get up on the start line, and I wanted that whole shot. So I mean, as soon as they blew the whistle, I took off like they dropped the gate at a BMX race. Man, I was just like hauling tail to try to be the first one in the trailhead, and I was like second one in. And once we went in, it came into a dip, and I got shoved off to the left of the dip, and I kind of flipped over my handlebars. But that was fine. I jumped up, I ran out of it. When I got back on my bike, my front tire was like rubbing the fork a little bit, and I was sitting there trying to fix it and everything. But I realized that I had broke the little arm thing, what you call it, that goes across the fork. I'd snapped it. So my first race, I was out within the first like 25 seconds.
That's awesome.
Everybody was like, "Where's Dave? Where's Dave?" Everybody was looking for it because they said he was like the second one in the woods. And then I come walking out, and they're like, "What happened?" I was like, "Broke my fork." That was my first race.
And you did more after that.
Oh yeah, I did a lot more.
Out of your bike fleet, out of all the bikes you've ever had, what's been your favorite bike you've ever had?
Oh man. Well, right now we're sponsored by Specialized, and I'm hooked on these e-bikes, dude. And I've got the Kenevo SL. It's a full carbon enduro bike, is what it is, and it is sweet. So right now, that's probably the best thing I'm riding right now, and it's not because it's an e-bike. It's mainly because the durability of it and everything. But aside from the e-bike, shoot, my XC bike that I had that I raced with years ago was a Felt 9, and it was fully carbon. Yep. I had that thing light as a feather, dude. I think I might have had it at 18 pounds. It had the old Chris King hubs on them. It was a sweet bike, dude. I hate to see that one go. That was my first true like 29er. It took me a while to transition over to a 29er. And I still like to ride 27 and a half, or what they call them, 650Bs. I'm starting to get back on the 29ers these days. So all my bikes now are pretty much 29ers. I just always liked the 27 and a half because I felt like it was a smaller wheel. I was able to kind of maneuver like a BMX bike. But now that I've gotten older and ridden a lot longer, than I probably still have more years of BMX under my belt than I have mountain biking. It's starting to feel more comfortable on a mountain bike as always. So,
why do you love the sport of bikes, and what keeps you going with this?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, just as young as I can remember, I started riding bikes without training wheels when I was about 4 years old. And when I was a kid, bikes was our transportation. I was raised to take care of my bikes because if you broke it, you're walking. It wasn't like you had a whole fleet of bikes. I learned to take appreciation of my bikes and take care of them and clean them and work on them and all that good stuff. It was my transportation. And when I got into BMX was just it's a drug. It was like if I wasn't doing something with my bike that day, every day, it was like I was wasting my life or something. And I felt that hard whenever, I actually had to hang my bike up and quit BMX and I started getting into golf. I never thought that I would never ride a bike again. And when I started playing golf, I still feel empty somehow of riding. And once I got back on like riding a mountain bike to get in shape, I didn't look at it as an exercise. I looked at it as like this is a sport. This is something that I truly love, and I still cannot wrap my head around it because it doesn't matter. I mean, if it's got two wheels on it, I want to ride it. I'm just a big fan of bikes in general. I mean, from vintage bicycles to the latest and greatest technology, and I just hope that it keeps on going because it's hard these days because I see what I was kind of leading up to is the love of the sport because of me getting around on it as transportation wise and showing off doing tricks at the same time. I think a lot of the kids and these newer generations don't really understand that because they don't need bikes to get around anymore like we did growing up. It's more of a choice now for them. I'd love to see that change and have kids experience kind of like what we had growing up to where you just jumped on a bike and went down to your buddy's house and knocked on his door and said, "Hey man, you want to go hit some jumps? You want to go do this?" Instead of, texting and saying, "Hey man, what you doing?" "Oh, I'm playing video games." "You want to go ride?" "Nah, I'm good. It's hot outside." We didn't have that luxury. We just did it. And now I'm seeing a huge gap in riding these days because it seems like they're trying to make it a seasonal sport. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as a seasonal sport when it came to biking. You did it every day, and that's how
Yep.
you got good. Regardless of what you do, I don't care if it's, I mean, if biking isn't your thing and say baseball or whatever, or anything, I don't care, checkers, I don't care, whatever it is, you're only going to get good at what you're doing if you do it on the regular. That's why you have gymnastics that are phenomenal. That's why you have swimmers or strong and, et cetera. People who race cars or whatever. I mean, you do it enough, you get good at it. And that's what I always stress to people. I'm like, do you like riding your bike? Do you enjoy it? Then ride it because it's fun. Don't just ride it because, you're forced to get in shape for a race or you're forced to get in shape because you got this thing coming on. Get on your bike because it's fun. Because once it's no fun, you're going to hang that bike up. And I see a lot of these kids go through these middle school, high school leagues. And then as soon as they're 18 years old, they don't ride anymore. You don't see them anymore. You might see them down the road, maybe when they're about 28, 30 years old, when they realize, oh, I kind of missed the sport, and they come back around. But a lot of them these days, I was that kid. I told you, I was
Yeah.
18, 19 and hung my bike up. I didn't really look back at, riding until I met my wife. And, when I met my wife and saw the X Games, I was triggered again. It was like I was having withdrawals when I saw it on TV. I was like, oh, I got to get back on my bike. And hopefully some of these kids, because I've seen some great talented kids, just stop riding, but I've seen a lot carry on, and it's been paying off for them. So that's something else that I like watching and kind of having my hand in, is seeing some of these kids grow to a level to, I've seen kids become pro, and I've seen kids compete against Olympians. But if you're not having fun and it turns into a seasonal sport and kids aren't touching their bikes for a full year, then they have no interest.
Oh,
It's those who truly want to ride and carry it to another level. And what's so awesome about this sport is it's not like football and baseball where your career ends after, X amount of years. This is a sport. I had a guy who was 70 years old racing this past weekend, which is just a number. He's just been around the sun more times than some. And I'm telling you, he could smoke my ass easy. I hope at 70 years old, I'm killing it like this man. But you could just see the joy in his face of how he still loves riding, and he's been doing it his entire life. So that's what I like to see.
yeah, I agree with you, man. The kids just have fun, get on a bike. I like your point about it'd be cool for these kids to be able to experience how we grew up, because you're right. It was hop on a bike to wherever you wanted to go, whether it was a friend's house or to the candy store or wherever it was. You jumped on your bike. There was no texting, and there was no we're staying inside because it's hot. It was let's go outside anyway, because
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh yeah. Dude, I wish I could have like kept up with all the hours and time that we we dug up trails and built jumps and built ramps and stuff like that. and those kids are still out there. I'm not taking it from them. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some listeners saying, "I do that now. What you talking about, Dave?" No, I know, man. I've got some diehard kids who come to our races, and they send me videos of them, and I'm telling you, I want to go and play with them so bad. I want to go,
Right.
some of the cool stuff that these kids are riding and doing, I'm like, man, I got to go out there and ride with these guys. This is awesome.
I think the difference though is like you said, today there's a few of them. Back when we were, it was our age, it was everybody had
It was
bikes.
everybody. It was everybody.
Yeah.
I rode a bike to school until I got a car. Every day I rode a bicycle to school, and those bike racks were full. Every kid, I mean, had bikes up there. And now it's funny because you get these group rides. Hey, let's get everybody on a bike. Back in the day, people would have laughed at you like, "What are you talking about? We're already on a bike." It's like,
Right.
you see about 12 of us coming down the hill. Now you see 12 kids coming down the hill. They're wondering what the heck's going on. But
Yeah, that's funny. What, did they steal something? What are they doing?
yeah, I know it. What they do? Whose bikes are those? No. I wish there was some way that we could change that somehow. I know kids who are, I mean, family members that are well up into their teens who've never rode a bike.
That's just
And
crazy.
I kid you not. And I'm like, are you serious? You've never learned to ride a bike your entire life. It was like a must when I was growing up. You better know
Yep.
how to ride a bike or you're going to be walking.
Exactly. Yeah, that's crazy. I think that the change is more people getting involved in youth programs and getting kids on bikes. I think that's pretty, I mean, I don't see any other way of going back and getting rid of cell phones and video games. So I think we just have to have more adults doing youth programs and getting more kids on bikes.
And that's it. I mean, and that's what we push. I want to go back. I'm not taking anything away from these middle school, high school leagues. I think what they're doing is awesome. When I speak about this, I mean, I'm one of those parents slash coaches that want to see more kids on bikes. And if we can show them that it's fun, it's exciting, you can make tons of friends doing this. And, it's a way of keeping fit and healthy. Just do it. So I get more excited seeing more kids on bikes than I do adults, because the adults, to me, especially my age, I know how they feel about it. So I mean, they grew up like I did. I think I would guess probably about 35 and older can kind of guy I can get kind of like an understanding of where we all come from. But younger than that, now it's kind of like educating these kids, the importance of like why you should ride or to do anything, to be active, especially. So I'm a huge supporter of definitely getting kids on bikes. And that's why we continue to put on these kids races and junior races and things like that, because we want to see them grow. We want to see them, you don't have to win. You ain't got to be the first one across the finish line. It's a matter of coming out here and just have fun. I mean, just freaking have fun. And if it is something that you want to be competitive in, do it. But my thing is you even got to come to a race. Let's have more group rides where we're getting more kids out on bikes and adults that, want to get back in shape and things like that. So I'm all for it. We used to have a lot of that going on here in Columbus. We'd have twice a week. There was like at least some kind of mountain bike group ride that we'd always have. I don't know what's happened these days. I'm not around here that much anymore because I'm like always on the road. So I try to make as many rides as I can, but normally I'm either scouting trails now or putting on a race somewhere. We just got to see more of those group rides and everything. And I see a lot of people out there still working hard on trails and things like that. And that's another thing, just trying to get more people out there to lend a helping hand. I mean, you dig it, you ride it, kind of thing, kind of show people what it takes to maintain these trails and keep them up. A lot of people want to ride them, but a lot of people don't want to, those same people don't want to work on them either. So that's another subject.
Right. That is another subject. You're correct. The trails don't make themselves.
They don't. In respect to those who do. Now, I was going back to that question you asked me about what is it about riding bikes? I'm just trying to think, man. It's just, It's been a question my mom and dad's asked me, because neither my mom or dad rode bikes. I don't think I've ever seen my mom my entire life ride a bike. She swears up and down that I have. I was like, Mom, I've never seen you on a bike. My dad, he would take me on little rides when I was a kid, but once I got into BMX, I was in my own world. I put on that Walkman. Remember the Walkman?
Oh yeah.
I had my tape deck stuffed down in my pocket.
That's awesome.
Oh, kids, you don't know about that.
No, they don't. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we check out? I know we've been on for quite a bit because we had some technical difficulties to start, but
those out there who are first time listeners or never heard of Go Nuts Biking, just check us out, gonutsbiking.com. Like I said, we have races all in the Southeast. We'll be up in Virginia this year. We'll be in Bryce Mountain. We'll be at Massanutten. And we have a discipline for everybody, whether it's XC, downhill, endurance. We've got a little something for everybody. Got a lot of big events coming on this year. So go to our website, check it out. GoNutsBiking.com. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy. And if people want to connect with you, do you have any social media on that you
you can find us pretty much on all social media links. You can go to Facebook, Instagram. We even have Twitter. That's pretty much it. We try to post on the regular, keep everybody updated on what's going on. We do, a lot of pre and post rides, to let you know how the event went if you missed out and what to look forward to on the next one. So check us out.
And your handle was what for social media?
Go Nuts Biking. Everything's Go Nuts Biking.
Pretty easy.
Just find the crazy squirrel or the go, and there'll be two nuts there. Go Nuts.
Two big acorns.
Big acorns. That's it. Yeah. That's what we're famous for. All of our nut names. So
absolutely. They're a riot.
Some of our sponsors sponsored us just because of our names, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's kind of funny.
We had a couple of them just say, man, we love your names, man. How can we be part of it? So it's awesome.
That is awesome.
Every race always feels like a first one when we put it on. Just a little bit more organized now from the beginning.
Heck yeah. So if you're listening and you want to go check out one of his races, go to the website, look at the schedule, and get to one of his races.
Yep, yeah.
I've had a fun conversation today with you, just like we had fun in Snowshoe. Keep making racing fun as a promoter, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Hey, man, thanks for having me, and got to get you to one of our races, bro. So look at the calendar. I hope to see you soon.
I'm going to look at the calendar. This was a lot of fun. And to all the listeners, gratitude. You have just listened to Unpacking the Athlete.